Hey, Archie, can I put my emergency fund in the stock market?
Well, Rob, that really wouldn't make sense. I'm Archie Hoxton.
And I'm Rob Hoxton.
And this is Last Paycheck, weekly wisdom to help you retire and stay that way. Welcome back to the Last Paycheck Podcast, brought to you by Hoxton Planning and Management. We're your hosts, CFP professionals Archie Hoxton and Rob Hoxton. And today we're going to talk about a question that we get all the time as financial planners, and it has to do with cash. And really, it's a timely question because cash is pretty attractive right now, has been for about a year or so. But it's how much should I keep in cash?
And not only that, I mean, it's what sort of instrument should you use if you're going to hold cash? Should it be some high yield savings, which the interest rates move quickly, or should you be locking it in a little bit longer because of kind of where speculation is with respect to where interest rates are headed in the short term?
Right. There's many layers to this question, and it comes up from, it sort of arises out of the circumstances of your life. Maybe you're trying to build an emergency fund and you're thinking, I might be there. When should I start, putting more money into my retirement savings or my investments? Or maybe you just had a windfall of some kind and you're thinking, okay, I want to invest some, but I want to keep some cash for XYZ, whatever it is. So as with many things, the answer is it depends on your personal circumstances, but we're going to lay out some things to think about as you decide what's going to be right for you in this topic.
I was talking to a younger investor very recently, and it was really cool because he's got a lot of energy. He's excited about investing. He doesn't really want to have any money that's not working for him.
Right.
So he doesn't want to have a whole lot of money sitting in his savings account. He wants to invest. And I can understand why, because the market for the last year, a little over a year, it's just been, moving higher. And so it's really tempting to take every last little bit of cash that you have and put it at risk in the market because you don't want to miss out. There's sort of that FOMO, fear of missing out on whatever exciting stuff is happening in stocks or other investments. And of course, anything in the extreme can be dangerous. And so this is a great time with what's been happening in the markets and the temptation to be fully invested where it might make sense to just take a breather and step back and talk about how much cash you should have. What do you think?
There's a few reasons why, because there's a good point to that. You want to be investing. You don't want to be holding too much back and missing out on growth opportunities in the markets and allowing your cash and really your assets to be eaten away by inflation over time and lose purchasing power. But there are good reasons to keep cash. I'd say reason number one is having an emergency fund. And it's kind of one of those, boring milestones where if you're someone who's aggressive and wants to invest aggressively, having an emergency fund maybe feels like a boring milestone, but it is really important.
Why not have an emergency fund that's invested in the S&P 500 index fund?
Well, that's a great question. The main reason is that if you have a $20,000 emergency and you had $20,000 in cash, the S&P 500 takes a dip. You're not going to have $20,000 for that $20,000 emergency. You're going to have to take a loss.
Right.
And then what's next? Well, maybe it's credit card. And then you're paying, credit card interest rates. And then you might be in real big trouble. So that's reason number one, why not, just put it at risk. But there's a lot of debate on how big an emergency fund really should be, how much you should actually have. And the reason there's debate is because everyone's circumstances are different, and it really kind of depends on your personal circumstances. But
Well, let's talk about what it could depend on. It could depend in part on how the rest of your money's invested, right?
Yeah.
So if you're really aggressive in your investment and you're basically all stocks, then there's a much stronger case to be made for having a larger emergency reserve, right? Because if you do need money and all of your money's in stocks and it takes a hit, you don't want to sell when the market's down, right?
Right.
Because you may end up selling when the market's down, but you may still have a profit. So you're not only selling when the market's down, but you're also paying taxes on capital gains, double whammy. So that might make sense to have a little bit more in money market funds. I have more in cash and money market funds because my portfolio tends to be pretty aggressive.
Yeah.
And I've been doing this long enough, 30 plus years, to know that the market takes a dip when you least expect it.
And when you
least
afford it.
Yeah. So that would be one scenario, is if your portfolio otherwise is quite aggressive, well, that might be a scenario where you might want to have more than just 3 months of living expenses in an emergency fund.
Yeah. Because that kind of goes to the old rule of thumb. It's the 3 to 6 months. And, it's kind of up to you to determine whether it's 3 or 6. I would argue there are times where it probably ought to be more than 3 to 6 months. Maybe it's because you've got a lot in stocks and you're retired. Maybe, and this is, I think, a really common, potentially overlooked option or reason, would be if you have unpredictable income. Like you're a small business owner and in your line of work, it's either rain or shine. Like you get paid all at once and then you're not paid for a while and you're not sure when the next opportunity is going to arise. And so in that case, if you go into a really dry season, you might want to have plenty of cash to get you through until you get that next deal that you get some cash inflow to pay yourself. Sometimes people work in very, very seasonal, jobs. Construction can be like that. I know when I was living in Texas, sometimes guys worked out on the oil rigs. Their work tended to be, it was like feast or famine. So in those famine times, they would need to have a whole lot of cash on the sideline. So there are reasons why you might want to have more than 6 months, in order to, cover yourself through those famine times. Another thing to consider would be your disability insurance, because I think this is an emergency that is, one of the most important emergencies that can happen is you lose your ability to work, either in your occupation or in any occupation.
Yeah. And most of these private policies and even the group long-term disability policies have a 90-day waiting period, right? That's like your time deductible.
Right.
So they're not going to cover your paycheck or a portion of your paycheck until you've been out of work for at least 3 months. So there you go. Right there alone is reason to have at least a 90-day emergency fund.
Or a short-term disability policy. Because, you have to think, 3 months without a paycheck could be devastating. And then your pay is usually, your disability benefits may be a reduced version of what you were making.
60% or something, yeah. Mm-hmm.
There's almost a whole other episode there talking about disability insurance and how important it is. And how, for example, you're more likely to become disabled than to pass away unexpectedly. So that it's incredibly important insurance, but I digress. That's a whole other episode.
Yeah.
Yeah. What are some more reasons why we might want to keep some cash on the sidelines?
An example might be that, you know that you're going to have to replace your roof in the next 2 to 3 years. I would argue that if there's a major expense that's 2 to 3 years out, as opposed to 5 years out, for instance, you really shouldn't put that money at risk investing in stocks. That money should be in whatever the highest yielding cash, guaranteed instrument that you can find, and not at risk. You could put it at risk and get lucky.
Yeah. Oh,
Yeah,
you certainly
you
could.
can, but you can just as easily not have it when the roof starts to drip on your dining room table.
Yeah. Because when you're talking about short-term investing, it's luck. I mean, you are relying on luck. There isn't much more to it than that. The longer the time period that you're investing for, the less it becomes about luck, and the more it becomes about these long trends of growth that we have history to to rely on to understand kind of what happens in the big picture. But if you're talking about a year or 2 years, even 3 years, you're relying on luck. And when it comes to like things that have to be done, you got to replace the roof, got to pay your taxes, things like
Taxes, yeah.
you don't want to rely on luck. And that's another one. I mean, taxes. If you make estimated payments, maybe you might need to have some money on the sidelines throughout the year to make those estimated payments, and then some, an extra cushion for when April 15th rolls around and maybe your estimated payments were insufficient and, you got a bigger bill.
Maybe you forgot early in the year that you had some tax event and now you're going to have a larger than expected bill. Every once in a while we'll get a call from a client. They need money quickly to pay taxes and we have to sell investments. And oftentimes it's because something happened earlier in the year that they forgot about. Maybe they had this little 401k plan that had $5,000 in it, and it was at a former employer, and they were like, I'm not going to roll that over. I could just use the cash, and they take it. And then they forget that, oh, yeah, they're going to have a big tax bill and penalties on that. And they didn't tell us about it. There are things like that happen. So having a little extra cash makes sense. And one of the questions that I know you're getting, Archie, and I am too, is, while we're recording this, which is like the beginning of September 2024, there's a lot of speculation about what the Fed is going to do with interest rates. Most think that the Fed will cut in the September meeting. And so the questions begin, am I holding the right kind of cash instrument for what may or may not be coming? So if we do get interest rate cuts, what's going to happen with those high yield savings accounts?
Yeah, so those are high yield savings accounts, money market funds. Those are probably going to be the first instruments to, fall in terms of the interest rate that they're paying you. And so you'll notice if you had a savings account in 2022, every month or so, you get a little notification, oh, you're now earning X, which is higher than what you were before. And then that kept happening.
Mm-hmm.
The reverse would be true if we saw interest rate cuts over time.
Banks are going to be really quick to cut those. And so the question is...
That's a liability for the bank. And as soon as they can justify in the competitive space paying less, that's going to happen.
Yeah. So then the question becomes as well, as a saver, should we be in this highly liquid savings account, or should we look to maybe lock in current rates for a little longer by using a certificate of deposit, buying a 12 or 18-month certificate of deposit? Those will move just as quickly with the market.
Right.
But you can, in some cases, try to lock in a higher rate for longer, but you have a tendency to lose some liquidity when you do that.
Right. Yeah. And because if you take it early, there's some kind of penalty. But if right now, hey, okay, I'm not going to need this money, this cash for a year. Well, there's probably, we're in the last window of opportunity to lock in the current rates for the next year. And then all the new issue CDs that come out will be, at lower rates once those rate cuts come. And if you were to buy an existing CD on the secondary market, there would be kind of a markdown based on the
So
the
you
rates.
could time the maturities for whatever the big expense might be if you know it's coming, like that roof, or the tax bill. If you know that you're going to have to pay a big tax bill on April 15th, you could have you could buy a CD that is going to mature, April 1st. And then those funds are available to you, and you've had FDIC insurance and guaranteed, interest.
Yeah. There's going to be some funds that you're not going to want to do that with, though, because like we said, CDs are less liquid. So anything that you need for emergencies, things that could pop up in the short term, you want to keep liquid. And the unfortunate reality of cash is that we're at the end of a nice window to earn lots on your cash. Potentially, we don't know for certain. But so hopefully you've been earning more on your cash now than you were a couple years ago, because this window of opportunity may go away. But still, liquidity is the primary objective for emergency funds. So if we see that happen, lock in what you can with that short-term money, keep it liquid. So I think that just about is time. So we hope you enjoyed the episode. Remember to like, subscribe, share with your family and friends. Leave us a comment if you have questions. You can also text us, call us, set up some time to chat. And so we'll look forward to the next one, and have a great one. You've been watching Last Paycheck, weekly wisdom to help you retire and stay that way. If you like this show, be sure to hit like and subscribe. Last Paycheck is available anywhere you get your podcasts.